Welcome to Talking Points. I'm Esme Murphy, and I am talking what happened in elections, local and national. What the heck happened in Saint Paul with Mayor Melvin Carter, who cruised to re-election 4 years ago, being upended by Representative Kaohly, who just entered the race in August. In Minneapolis, voters seem to send mixed signals, giving relatively moderate Mayor Jacob Frey a third term, but at the same time, it appears they've elected a city council where DSA members and their supporters could still have the majority. And nationally, a big night for Democrats. But which Democrats? Moderates won a couple of governor's races in Virginia and New Jersey, but also a Democratic socialist cruises to victory in New York. Joining me to discuss all this, Democratic analyst Jeff Hayden and Republican Amy Frederickson. Both of you obviously have been in Senate leadership, so you guys have held positions of power. You've seen a lot. What happened in St. Paul?
Well, so as a former resident of St. Paul who just moved out last year.
You moved out last year.
I moved out last year. There has just been a deterioration in the city. Even in the time that I was there, I saw. And it felt like that for the premium you were paying to live in St. Paul, the quality of life was not there. The rent control issue was massive, so they stopped building. There was an affordability issue around all things, right? It was expensive to live there, but yet I always felt like the roads were never plowed. Yeah. It just felt like, and besides the downtown being just dead, it was just, I think after a time people were just thinking, what has Mayor Carter been doing about all of this? Right.
Mayor Carter obviously hailed as a superstar for many years, very charismatic, young, has so many innovative policies that he worked on, giving everybody $50 for an account for children who get to go to college, that kind of thing. But what in the end, where does this leave him, and what in the end do you think failed him, Jeff?
Well, I think Amy hit on something as, cities, you can do really innovative and smart things, and I think that Mayor Carter has. I think that this issue around library cards and making sure that no one can be prohibited, to go checking out a book because they have a fee, or the baby bonds, or, basic income, those things are great, kind of post-COVID kind of things. But what it comes down to in a city is plowing the streets, right? It's fixing the streets. It's public safety. It's first responders. It's your property tax. It's having some sort of vibrant city.
I heard the property tax, and I also heard people were upset with the mayor's push for the bike lanes on Summit Avenue because they had to cut down the beautiful trees.
Yeah, and that's always a tough one there. So those are the nuts and bolts issues that happen in cities, and I think that with all due respect, and Melvin Carter's a friend. We've been friends multiple generations. I know his parents and all those things. But I think that at a certain point you have to be able to communicate your message. Well, you have to be able to tell people what the future looks like. You have to tell people what the plan is. Yeah. He inherited a downtown that was crumbling. He's got good portions of his land that the state and the federal government use. He doesn't get tax revenue for. But also around the stadium in the Midway, there's no real development that was supposed to come there. So
and I feel like he didn't listen to affordability issues. Just the city, what I heard from people talking there, and you to a certain extent said it had become unaffordable.
It had become unaffordable. It's certainly not a value-based proposition, right? You were paying a premium for something. But I also don't want to sleep on Representative, now Mayor-elect Kaohly, because she jumped in late. But she is a daughter of St. Paul. She has represented the area. She worked her tail off. And she gave a message, by the way, that was not negative. She was not anti-Mayor Carter. She was simply, time for a change. I'm concerned about these things. You're concerned about these things. Let's try a different approach.
It's the most unusual campaign. It's the most unusual campaign I've ever seen. The most unusual successful campaign I've ever seen. Yeah. Or if you asked her what's wrong with Mayor Carter, she's running against him. She says, "Well, I'm not really running against Mayor Carter." Well, obviously she is, but she wasn't, in any way denigrating Mayor Carter. She was just talking about time for a change, time to have somebody else in there.
Yeah, I think it was really smart. One, she worked for Mayor Carter, he gave her a start in politics, and so I think she has a tremendous amount of respect for him. At one point, she got in trouble, or not trouble, but there was some scrutiny in the legislature because she was pushing for some legislation that was for St. Paul, and she was still working there, and so it wasn't a problem. But people were saying that that's how close she was to the city. I think she heard and understood, and people talked to her, and she understood that there needed to be a change, and thus she really tactfully got through the process without being negative, but also started addressing the issues.
What about ranked choice voting? Because Melvin Carter was on top after that first round. He was on top. He was winning, and then you count the second place votes. I mean, do you think there's going to be any second guessing of that at all?
Here's the deal. It's established.
Or just the system.
I mean, it's the system. We've done it. So when you start a campaign, if you want to campaign in Minneapolis or St. Paul or other places that have ranked choice voting, that's part of your strategy. It's no longer like something that's new and that's novel. We've been doing this now, at least in Minneapolis, for close to 20 years, and St. Paul probably about the same. So even though we could say that about these elections, it is now part of our system of electing people in Minneapolis, St. Paul's ranked choice.
But yet, and it is, Minnetonka had a vote on whether to take it down and repeal ranked choice voting a few years ago, and they overwhelmingly approved it. It does still seem to be popular, but yet you have outcomes that some people might question, like this one.
Well, this one was supposed to be how it works, right?
Yeah.
There were four or five candidates in the race, and it was obviously Mayor Carter against kind of everybody else, and the everybody else's just didn't feel like he was doing enough job, and they went the other way. I'm not a fan of ranked choice voting. I don't think we should do it, but it's, the cities are doing it, so, and they voted for it.
All right.
Well, what can I say?
Let's move on to Minneapolis. Mayor Jacob Frey wins a third term. That's not easy to do, and he did it, especially with what Minneapolis has gone through.
That's right.
I mean, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. I think about a mentor of mine that talked about the difference between sprinters and marathon runners, and Jacob actually is a marathon runner. Like, he was a world-class marathon runner before he became a politician. And I think about Jacob in that context. He is a marathon runner. There are a lot of times, and I think even me as an elected official, I would have stopped. I would have said that's enough for me. But he continued to run and run and run and get better and get better and get better. And at the end of this cycle, I just seen him, earlier, today, giving kind of his acceptance speech, and he sounds as good as he's ever sounded, and anybody else would have been defeated. And
that's what I'm saying. It's kind of hard, for detractors to say that this is not a hardworking, experienced mayor. It's just not true. Maybe it was true first term, right? Maybe it was sort of like the shine was still on the apple then. But this is a mayor that has been through
it all,
everything, and survived it, and is still winning elections in a really tough city with a city council that really isn't on his side.
Well, let's talk about the city council, because in my math, it looks like the Democratic Socialists really haven't lost much ground. I know, Jeff, you think maybe they have.
Yeah.
I mean, so they voted for a moderate for mayor and still are keeping a Democratic Socialist council.
Well, we said this before, these labels are fluid. So I still think that Jacob is a progressive, and I think he thinks that he's a progressive.
Well, he is a progressive.
He is a progressive. As the Republican in the room, he's a progressive.
So he may not be.
Only in Minneapolis.
Only in Minneapolis. I said it the other day, it's cappuccino and lattes or whatever.
Right.
However, I do think that some of that the city has sent a signal, even though the council, allowed the DSA members, a bunch of them will be coming back, and they're adding a few, are they at least adding one, to the mix. I think that there are some folks that are really thinking about what's best for this city. So I think that Council Member Osmond is not necessarily a card-carrying DSA member, though he voted with him a lot. But what's he going to do, right? I think we have maybe some practical. I'm hoping that our new council member, Councilmember Soren Stevens in the 8th Ward, where I used to live, though he's a very liberal person.
Well, he's a Democratic Socialist.
He's a Democratic Socialist.
He was up there at Fateh's rally there.
Totally get it. But he also represents a district that, though they voted for him overwhelmingly, they expect for him to do pragmatic things. It's an area I've represented for a long time. So I'm hoping that there's a bit of a change there.
All right, let's talk nationally. A big night for Democrats. I think we all agree on that. There are moderates elected as Virginia governor, New Jersey governor, and obviously the Democratic Socialists in New York. Who won here, the moderate Democrats or the super progressive Democrats, or is it just a big win for all?
I think it's a big win for Democrats as a whole, and I think that the focus was really on people and working class issues. What I find to be interesting is the same thing that President Trump won on feels like less than a year ago, is the same thing that Democrats have now talked about in New York, in New Jersey. And as we just talked about, and I'll let Amy talk about this, especially in Virginia, which has a huge amount of federal workers in Northern Virginia that are currently on layover. It's probably the worst time to have an election based on kind of bread and butter issues right now.
There were some situational things with these candidates. So, for example, in New York, you're running against Andrew Cuomo, who had sexual harassment charges, who lied about putting seniors and dying during COVID. So, I mean, not great candidates. Same thing in Virginia, not a strong Republican candidate. Having said that, Republicans still need to look at this election and say, okay, this is a snapshot. They can turn it around for the midterms, but they're going to have to start thinking about things. First of all, you can't be telling people that the economy is just going strong now and everything's fixed. That was a mistake that Joe Biden made, and people. And
you're saying the Trump administration is in danger of doing that right now.
They are. Oh, the stock market's up. Okay, but if I'm paying, $10 at the grocery store for, you're telling me not to believe my lying eyes that things are still, that people are still struggling.
Or if
and then sort of a callousness about SNAP, right? So they have a shutdown, and you have folks that are not receiving their SNAP benefits. Well, you can argue all day long about how many people are on SNAP and all that, but in the end, you got seniors that are struggling to put food on the table, and they're not sure where their next food is coming. They're the food shelves that are saying, "Hey, our lines are long, and we're running out of food." That's a tough. That's tough.
I'm sorry. Think about a federal worker that's not only been furloughed, or the ones that have to work. The air traffic controller, people in law enforcement who are having to go to work, not get a paycheck, and then having to leave work and go to a food shelf in order to feed their families. That's happening in real time.
Travelers and the stalls in the airports.
And obviously those people are the ones who are the real victims here, were really affected. But all the rest of us going to the grocery store and getting a bag of apples that's $21. That was my little shocker.
Now they can do things and they can turn things around, and I believe that long term they're doing some good for the economic vitality of this country. But you're going to have to talk about it in different terms than everything's fixed, nothing to see here.
Okay. Well, Amy Koch, Republican. Jeff is obviously a Democrat. Thank you so much, Jeff Hayden and Amy Frederickson, for being here. We really appreciate it. That does it for this edition of Talking Points. As always, please email me with comments and suggestions at esme@cbs.com. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Esme Murphy, WCCO News.